Hello and welcome to the unexpected part 2 of the Legendborn review and synopsis. I was not anticipating on making a part 1 and part 2, but it's just how it worked out, and I think it worked out pretty well. So, since I didn't have an intro planned initially when I was recording the first time, this is my intro. And this is also where I tell you painfully so that I broke my promise. It has been how many weeks? We're 6 weeks into 2024 and I caved. And I'm sorry to say it, but I think you understand why. Like, look at those edges. Isn't that like so fucking pretty? And I get all the excerpts, which I ironically mentioned at the end of the video. And I'm like, oh man, maybe I'll break my promise. Like, I heard this book is coming out and I was totally not intending on buying it. But then I saw her Instagram post and she was like, oh yeah, it's a limited print. So like once it's gone forever. And the FOMO really hit me really bad. And I apologize. I broke my promises. I won't do it again. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty book. And I only bought one, so I don't feel that bad. Anyway, Pearl, another one of Victoria's ancestors, is giving birth to a baby, but then the baby comes out and everyone's freaking out because the baby has amber eyes. Who else has amber eyes? Cell. So Bree finds out that all the Merlins are demons. So they cast away the baby. They call him a crossroads baby. One of the people from the second memory walk takes Bree again to another memory with this girl, Ruth, another one of Victoria's ancestors, actually her sister, where they're back at the college at the University of North Carolina. And Ruth ends up coming upon these hellhounds that are crossing through a gate. And so she finds out at the end of this chapter, Ruth went to school the same time as Bree's mom, and she makes all these like connections where she's essentially like, something must have happened with this specific memory where Ruth sees the hellhounds and that has to be connected to her mom. Bree runs back to the lodge to find Nick. He's not there. She only finds William. She goes to William and she's like, I know that Cell's a demon. And he's like, lower your voice. He tells her that all the Merlins are actually part Shadowborn, which is what they call the demons. They're technically descended from succubi. I thought this was a young adult novel. I feel like we're pushing the limits on young adult right now. I was blushing. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. My notes say, I know crazy Cell literally got that talk in him. So Cell can actually hear this conversation because since he's part Shadowborn, he has amazing hearing, amazing sight. He finds out that Bree knows this information because he's like eavesdropping on this conversation and he's super angry about it. Bree ends up going to a bar with Nick and some of the other Legendborn. They kind of make a scene because Bree's trying to like tell him all this information and Cell's like, you've been attacked many times. You need to stay by me this whole time, Pookie. You cannot leave my sight. So Bree ends up telling Nick about what she sees. She leaves out like specific details about like the rootcraft part of it. She tells Nick that she thinks her mother may have saw this gate opening that let all the hellhounds out. And that maybe, perhaps, because again, once-borns are not supposed to see this kind of stuff. So that's why they have like the Merlins with their mesmers and shit. Bree and Nick essentially come to the conclusion that maybe the Regents had something to do with her mother's death. So Bree and the other pages start trial number 2, where they go on a scavenger hunt to find 40 ether created objects that are scattered around the school. They each get paired with like a Legendborn. She's actually paired with Cell. He picks her specifically. She's like, this is weird. I'm nervous, as she should be. So they briefly kind of talk about why he thinks that she's Shadowborn, because she's like, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black? And it is. They have like a little like back and forth. It's kind of cute. Like you would almost think they were being friends. And Cell tells her that he knows that she can see ether. So she goes to the cemetery to find one of the ether created objects, because they're also like connected to riddles and shit. Cell organizes for one of his ether created hellhounds to catch her because he's like, you know what? I'm tired of waiting for you to expose that you're a demon. I'm gonna just let it happen. So he's been trying to elicit these emotional responses from her that'll like force her to show her demon self. Is this like zooming in? Am I doing this? So he's trying to force her hand, but then they're interrupted by an actual like fox. No, what do they call it? A hell fox. Bree ends up summoning her own mage flames to fight against the hell foxes. Selwyn and her end up running away. Nick and the others find Cell and Bree after they have successfully taken down these hell foxes. Cell actually ends up helping her. It's kind of sweet because she's like freaking out because she like used her mage flame to punch into the body of this fox, and it's like very heavy, also very dead on top of her, and she's freaking out because she can feel like its insides. She literally throws up from the sensation, and Cell is trying to help her because he's like, it's not gonna go away if your hand's still in it. You just need like it. He also calls her Bree because he had been calling her like Paige Matthews, Brianna. He had not been calling her by her cute little nickname. So he's like, Bree, like, it's okay, relax. And so she like relaxes, and they kind of like, he's actually being kind of nice to her. So Nick and the others end up finding Bree and Cell. He admits that he tried to get her killed. Nick punches him and gets super mad about it because he's like, that's my girl. You stay away from her. She's mine. You know, 4 was awakened and she's number 3 in the line. So they're getting very close to what they call Camland. Camland is like, think like Armageddon, Ragnarok, Camland, like the fight to end all fights is coming. They fear it'll come if Arthur is awakened. Cell ends up getting scolded by Nick and his father. Meanwhile, Bree and the other pages start training for this combat trial that's coming up. So on one side, Bree is learning about the Legendborn and all that good stuff, but then she's also learning about rootcraft and all that stuff. While she's training for this combat trial, Bree meets up with Victoria and this other root crafter on campus named Mariah. And Mariah can essentially use her craft to help people contact their ancestors. So they're trying to help Bree contact hers, but she has like this wall up that will refuse to let her get past it. So Patricia ends up breaking, wait, is it Patricia? No, it's Victoria. Her name is Patricia. No, I've been calling her Victoria for the last 2 hours. I'm so disappointed with myself. Anyway, Patricia breaks off her professional relationship with Bree because she is questioning Bree's intentions with learning more about her mother, and she essentially says that Bree is suffering from a very complex form of grief. So she suffers from acute traumatic grief, PTSD, and early symptoms of persistent complex bereavement disorder. And she essentially calls her out for only doing all this because she wants revenge against the people that she thinks killed her mother. So Bree is continuing her training. She's continuing her combat training. She's not doing good. She's literally getting her ass kicked. Cell actually offers to help train her, but they specifically mention that like they're gonna train her how to lose better, and they really put an emphasis on like losing. But then, as you'll see in the other chapters, I don't know how that happens. So it's the next trial. It's the official, like they're gonna fight each other. So Bree is paired up with 2 people. Bree ends up getting wins against this one page, Blake, again, not important, we don't really care, and Vaughn specifically. And that's why I'm like, that's weird, because Nick and Cell are both like, you just need to lose better. And we're like, okay, well, she's not gonna pass. But then she beats both of them. And these are like trained fighters and she beats them. So that was the only thing that I was like, I'm having a little bit of a hard time. I mean, with the context of what we know later on, I guess it makes more sense. Regardless. So she ends up beating Vaughn. Everyone is super impressed. They were not expecting this to happen. They were not expecting this from her. Nick is very proud. So while Bree is like collecting her accolades or whatever, Vaughn ends up attacking her after they call the match as like her win, and she passes out. So Bree is healed very barely. Like she's still hurt badly enough that she needs like a sling. Nick actually kicks Vaughn out of the competition because it's not just about being a good fighter. It's also about like sportsmanship, because at the end of the day, all these people have to work together. So if he's a sore loser about it, why would anyone want him as a squire? Nick kicks him out of the competition. Rightly so. After Bree wakes up, she goes to find Cell, who is in the woods. Cell is very angry. He's like taking out all his wrath or whatever on these poor trees. And he ends up telling her that the OG Merlin, the original Merlin, put like what he calls an insurance on his descendants so that if they're ever not bound to service to the order, that they will eventually succumb to their demon blood and turn into demons. So they're essentially forced to work for the order if they want to stay human, which is not good, especially because Nick and his father threatened Cell to kick him out of the order for being mean to Bree and trying to kill her. Bree feels very bad about this because she doesn't understand how they could possibly do that. Of course, Cell was not being a good guy, but afterwards, he like was being relatively nice to her. He was just trying to protect Nick, and she recognizes that, but they still threaten to literally have him turn into a demon for being mean to her. She is not happy about it for sure. In the previous chapters, Bree noticed on this little silver slab that tracks all their family lines that the Merlin, the king's mage to Martin Davis, was like kind of scratched, like as if they made a change to it. And she realizes, she understands, the scratched name on the silver wall is a king's mage that went rogue in the past and was switched out for a new king's mage after Selwyn tells her that, like, oh yeah, they can get cast out of the order, but he tells her it's never happened before. But she comes to the realization that it has. No one knows about it. She goes to Sel's room after she makes this realization, and she like tells him her theory. And in this chapter, we also see the beginnings, the little inklings of the love triangle, because Sel opens the door. He's fresh out of the shower. He has tattoos. He has black hair, glowing amber eyes, and he is ripped. And Bree cannot resist the wiles of a descendant of a succubus. And we cannot expect her to. Truly, we cannot. She delivers her theory, and he's like, that doesn't sound very plausible. Let's go find out. So he ends up grabbing her and jumps out of the window. So Bree and Sel end up breaking into Nick's childhood home to find answers because he knows that Martin Davis keeps all the records. Sel ends up telling Bree that he looked up to Nick all the time because Nick was all the things that he wasn't. He was human. He was a golden boy. He was great. Everyone loved him. Nobody really liked Sel, and that's why he fell in love with Nick. And I was like, clap if you're surprised. Crickets. No one was surprised because listen, I've been saying this forever. If you watch the original Merlin series, I don't know if anyone did. I've never met another soul who has. Merlin and Arthur are just canonically gay all the time. Be who you are for your pride. Anyway, so they end up finding documents going back to this original incident that happened that she saw on this memory walk. A gate was open on campus that let out a ton of hellhounds. Who opened this gate, they find out? Selwyn's mother, who used to be the king's mage to Martin Davis. Selwyn thought that his mother died, like during a mission when someone attacked her or whatever. He thought she died. She didn't. So she was the Merlin that went rogue. Bree's mother was one of the people that witnessed this event. So the order ended up having a Merlin follow her throughout her life to see if she would remember these incidents, because any of the witnesses that saw what happened, they mesmered each and every one of them, but they thought that because the event was so traumatic that the mesmer might not hold. So they had someone follow each and every witness throughout their life to see if they would remember the incident. They followed Bree's mom. They had multiple entries, multiple reports of people checking up on her, and at no point did the order think that she actually remembered. She did. Bree ends up going through these reports. Sel reads them with her. She finds out that the order actually had nothing to do with her mother's accident, and it truly was just an unfortunate car accident. Bree is incredibly upset. She ends up running from Nick's house. Nick and Felicity and a few of the other people end up finding both Sel and Bree there. Nick thinks that she's crying because Sel did something to her, and she's like, no, I just need to go home. I can't be here anymore. And she essentially leaves the order. So chapter 40, Bree is ignoring anyone from the order that is trying to get in contact with her. She's ignoring Nick, Felicity, Sarah, literally everyone. Alice notices that something is kind of off with Bree, even though she's spending more time with her, going to classes, things are not doing well. She's not in a good space. So Alice ends up telling her dad. Her dad ends up coming to campus and takes Bree out to breakfast where they kind of talk a little bit more about her mother, that in the years leading up to her death, her mom was really paranoid and kind of like getting on Bree a lot as a kid, which was something that she, I guess, like pushed out of her memory. Her dad essentially says that her mom was afraid that she would leave too early, that she would like die during Bree's lifetime because the same thing happened to her. Her dad ends up giving her a charm bracelet, like a gift that her mother left for her. So Bree goes back to her dorm. She opens this gift and lo and behold, it's imbued with ether. She's pulled into a memory walk by this ether where she sees her mother talking to a younger version of Bree, essentially explaining like her line. So Bree's mom is telling a younger Bree, who eventually gets mesmered, to not remember this event happening. She tells her that not only is she descended from Rootcraft and her family line is Rootcrafters, they're also Bloodcrafters. Meaning that the same spell that the original Merlin did for Arthur and the 13 Knights of the Round Table that made it that every descendant could be possessed and would have the power of the original 13, that same spell was used in Bree's family line. But the condition, because people are not supposed to have ether, they're not supposed to create it from their bodies the way that the Legendborn and her family line does. They each have a cost. For the Legendborn, it's abatement, which essentially lowers their lifespan as soon as they're awakened. For Bree's family line, it's that no two daughters can have that power at the same time. So each daughter is destined to lose their mother early in life. So Bree, now armed with this information, goes back to Patricia and Mariah and tries again to call out to her family line because she realizes that this like grief is tied so deeply into the fact that her family line is essentially poisoned by loss. They're constantly losing, and she has such a deep connection with death that now that she's able to confront it and now that she understands it, she's more willing to open up to her past ancestors. They figure out that Bree is a medium, and she ends up getting possessed by her grandmother, but not possessed in like the Scion lines, like literally, figuratively possessed. When did you stop recording? Not again. I can't do this again. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, you're on now. Okay, I have to like literally be watching this thing. So Bree's grandmother possesses her because she's essentially acting as like a lighthouse to try and get into contact to the first ancestor that created this like oath. So Bree is getting ready to go to this gala, this like final dinner where the Scions are going to pick their squires from the page class. Bree is actually planning on leaving the order, so this is like her final goodbye to everyone now that she has figured out everything about her past. So Bree ends up going. Everyone is super nice to her despite the fact that she like up and left. Bree and Nick end up running into Isaac, who is the king's mage to Martin Davis. The way they describe him is literally Aro from Twilight. I think that's how you say his name. I don't care. So Isaac is actually the person who replaced Sel's mom, and Isaac is also one of the mentors to Sel when he was training. Oh, and what I didn't mention that's also like super sad and super crazy is that so after Sel's mother essentially betrayed the order by opening up that gate, they ended up keeping her like in custody, like they arrested her essentially because they were like, oh, her bloodline is too powerful to let go to waste. So they put a lot of effort into rehabilitating her with the hopes that she could return to society and have a kid so they could continue her family line. But then shortly after having Sel, they had signs that she was reverting back to her like demon self, and they imprisoned her again. So they literally just let her out so she could be like a birthing mule and then put her back in captivity. I hate these people. Anyway, chapter 45. Bree and Sel dance together. This is the only thing you need to know about this chapter. They have a dance, and she asks him about whether or not it's possible to imbue an object with ether and for how long, because she's asking for her mother's bracelet, because it was imbued with ether for months, maybe even longer. They don't know. And he's like, it could, but it would take a long time. It'd be really hard to do that. He definitely likes her. She definitely likes him. This is like a very good slow burn. I love it. So in this chapter, all the Scions are picking their squires. William, who is the scion of Gawain, picks Witty to be his squire. Pete, who is another Scion. Okay, in my character list, Pete's really not an important character, and I couldn't think of anyone that would really look like him, so I picked Xolo Maridueña for the only reason that I'm in love with him and I just need him to be a part of everything that I do. Pete ends up choosing Greer as their squire, and Nick, when it's his turn, he picks Bree, and she accepts. There's chaos. Everyone is freaking out. They're like, you cannot pick her. What are you talking about? She does not belong here. Everyone is literally running up to Bree, trying to like grab her and be like, racism. Not good. Sel ends up picking her up, escorting her from the situation, saves her. She's like, wait, what about Nick? And he's like, oh, fine, I guess I'll get your boyfriend. Nick ends up meeting Bree, and he's like super excited, and they end up like getting a little I don't even want to look, a little steamy. Sel leaves. Nick gets called away by his dad, but while they're both gone, Bree is ambushed and knocked out. Isaac ends up capturing Bree, takes her back to the Davis family home, and this is where we find out that the main antagonist of the story is none other than Martin Davis, evil Doug Dimmadome himself. So the reason that Martin Davis is the evil villain is because he essentially wants to keep the vassal families in line. They're like not acting correctly in his eyes, and the people of the order are forgetting why the order was created in the first place. They're forgetting their mission because Camlan has not happened, so they haven't had like a major threat other than the occasional like demon slaying, like pretty chill, pretty normal Saturday, right? He's like, no, we need to remind these people. So he's been manufacturing Camlan by having gates opened up all across the coast. This time it is the East Coast. He's also obsessed with this fact that when he was in his Scion age, he was not called upon by Arthur. So he wants his son to get called by Arthur, and he's trying to force his hand. Bree is like, you're awful, you're evil, I'm gonna tell Nick all about it. And he's like, no, you won't. Isaac ends up bringing out Alice, who is like sleepwalking essentially. And he starts erasing her memories in front of Bree. Bree is crying. She's like, what is happening? Don't hurt Alice. Okay, fine. I won't say anything. I'll leave the order. And Martin is like, perfect. Even in all of this, he's like, you can't be here. You're a woman and you're a black woman on top of that. And he's like, it's two atrocities. And that's why I had to make the little addendum, because I was like, oh, maybe he's not racist. Extremely racist. Bree agrees to leave the order. She leaves with Alice. Bree and Alice are back in their dorm. Alice is freaking out. She's like, what happened? Someone took me. What's going on? And then she remembers that she was at this like mysterious house and Bree was there and she was tied up. Bree ends up telling her everything about the order. The oath didn't burn her because obviously she didn't actually take it. So she was able to tell Alice everything. Alice and Bree decide that they're going to go back to the order to warn everybody about what Martin Davis is doing. Bree and Alice end up going back to the lodge together. Also, do you like my sword earrings? I did this on purpose because there's like swords. Alice and Bree go back to the lodge. William is healing a lot of people because they found out during the night while Bree was getting captured, there was a lot of like hell demons that were coming out. So they were sending out all the scions and their squires to go fight. They were getting injured very badly and a lot of gates were opening. Sel was aware of these gates and was telling them like, hey, you guys gotta go. He was dispatching them, but everyone is getting very badly hurt. Bree ends up telling everyone about Martin Davis, and they believe her because Nick and his father ended up getting into a very verbal fight. Tor is extremely injured. She comes back with Sarah. They corroborated her story in some way. So they're mapping out like all these like gates that are opening up, and they realize that all these like hell demons are kind of like leading back to one central point, which William ends up saying is Excalibur. Excalibur is on the campus. It also exists in this crazy fantastical world. So they decide that they're all going to go use the underground tunnels that are strewn throughout campus to try and get to Excalibur. That's where they assume that Martin and Nick are. No one knows where they are at this time. So it's Vaughn, Fitz, Evan, Felicity, Russ, Tor, Sarah, William, and Bree, a very large group, all go down into the underground tunnels to get to Excalibur. So they all split up into groups because they have no idea like where exactly it is, but they're like, all tunnels will lead to Excalibur. So if we all just like take different routes, one of us will get there first. Bree, Fitz, and Evan, they take one tunnel, but then it starts getting like really small. They're also armed with weapons, and Vaughn is actually like kind of nice to her because I guess like she's technically the squire to what's his face? She's a squire now, so he's like kind of being nice. So Bree ended up taking a sword with her. They're in these tunnels. It's getting very cramped. All of a sudden, they start getting attacked by imps. What are imps? Demons. So they're fighting them off. It's very hectic. They're getting attacked on all sides. Bree is fighting for her life. One of the imps ends up clutching Fitz by his shoulders, and they're also walking along. Think of like it's like a path, and there's like a ravine at the bottom. So they're walking along this path. One of the imps rushes forward, grabs Fitz by the shoulders, lifts him up, flies him over the ravine, and drops him on top of a rock spire and impales him in the chest. This is a young adult novel, might I add. I literally had to pause the audiobook. I had to walk away, take many breaths. I took a stress ball with me. The tension in these last few chapters was so bad, as in like very tense, not like bad writing. It was like very, I had a panic attack. I had to watch like some dancing fruit to like calm down because I was like, I was very scared. This suddenly turned into like a horror novel. Anyway, Fitz dies horrifically. Oh, well. That's not mine. It's now Bree and Evan. Evan was the squire to Fitz. Fitz is now dead. Evan is heartbroken. They end up walking back because they're like, we still have to find the others. But while they're walking, Bree is like walking on this like gravel. She's walking on rocks. She's like, man, this is really loud. But then she notices that Evan's footsteps are very eerily quiet. And what's a very common trait amongst demons and Shadowborn, including Sel, their footsteps are very quiet. They don't make sound. She very quickly figures out that Evan is a demon. The very same demon that Sel accused her of being, one that can shapeshift into humans. Literally blindsided, I could never have imagined that Chad was a demon. She figures this out very quickly, like it like all clicks in her head. But she has to make it seem that she doesn't know. But Evan finds her out anyway and ends up trying to attack her. He admits that he killed the real Evan. We didn't even know when he died. So he killed the real Evan, took his place, and he says that it was really hard because Evan knew how to play the banjo, and he's like, you know how hard it is to play the banjo? I don't care, I don't feel bad for you. So Bree ends up summoning some of her mage flame and kicks Demon Evan off of her. So Roz, aka Demon Evan, exposes that he serves Morgaine. And the Morgaine, which is a line of Merlins, not the OG Merlin, Merlins as in the race of Merlins, that went rogue against the Order. So on one side, we have stupid Martin Davis that is trying to create Camland so that his son can get possessed by Arthur because he's like down so bad for Arthur for whatever reason. But then on the other side, we have an actual demon that's trying to, his motivation, let me tell you, the reason that these demons and the Morgaine are working together is because if the Scion of Arthur is awakened and killed, it kills off the line of the scions, so they'll never be reborn again. Like the Vampire Diaries kind of logic, where it's like, if you like, yeah. Little does Martin Davis know that his plan to awaken his son forcibly is also working to help these demons. Doug Dimmadome is the stupidest mother. So after Bree kicks off Demon Evan, Roz, she runs back because her grandmother, who's still in her body, tells her like, oh yeah, just go this way, go this way, go this way. And she's like, okay. So she rejoins with the others and she sees that they're all fighting other demons. Meanwhile, Martin and Nick are together by the sword. Nick is desperately trying to fight off Arthur's possession. He's losing this battle. When did Whitty show up? It is Whitty though. So Bree is trying to take in the scene around her. She sees Whitty. He is also fighting amongst the demons, but lo and behold, evil Evan Demon comes out and kills Whitty. And Bree is like really blaming herself because she's like, why did I think that I killed that dude? Like she just kicked him and she's like, why did I think that would kill him? So everyone is like fighting very valiantly. They're losing. They're losing bad. Nick ends up getting awakened. He's getting possessed by Arthur. Nick is like, he's like, like all powerful, right? He's walking over to Excalibur. He puts his hand on the hilt and he goes to pull out Excalibur. It doesn't budge. Everyone is surprised. Everyone is like, what is happening? Why can't the Scion of Arthur pull out the sword from the stone? Well, Nick is struggling over here to pull the sword from the stone. Bree's grandmother from inside her is like, she's here. And Bree's like, who's here? What has happened? The original mother. The one who started their little like bloodcrafter line is there and she's ready to talk to Bree. Bree is possessed by the old mother. Her name is Vera. She ends up going on a memory walk with Vera. This is chapter 54. I highly encourage to like really pay attention to chapter 54. It's written in such like a beautiful way. There's a lot of subtext and I had to personally reread it a few times to really like absorb it and understand. So Bree goes on a memory walk with Vera. Vera was the one that made the blood oath while she was running away from slave. So there's some key moments in this memory walk. First, it's Vera and she's witnessing the plantation owner, the slave master, fight with his wife. The wife ends up running out and she is pulled aside by this man who they say has like acorn colored hair. So the plantation owner, his name is Reynolds. His wife is having an affair with someone else. Reynolds consistently abuses Vera and ends up getting her pregnant. That fucking bastard. It was so infuriating to read. Reynolds and his wife are consistently fighting about having children, and Vera, Bree, like in this memory walk kind of stage, know that like them having children is not going to fix anything that's like wrong with them. Reynolds ends up getting Vera pregnant after he's taking advantage of her. Once he finds out that she is pregnant, he intends to harm her, and Vera can sense that he has a very vile intent to harm her, so she ends up trying to run away. While she is running away, she starts getting chased down by these slave catchers. She is desperately trying to get away, and while she does so, she calls out to the ancestors. She calls out for Root, and she makes a deal so that she can fight back against them. They tell her that there will be a cost, that there can only be one daughter at a time, and she says, yes, I will accept any cost, and she is imbued with the power. She is imbued by the power of both Rootcraft and this blood oath. So she's able to call ether from her own body, and this is the origin of the oath that has been passed down in Bree's bloodline. Bree essentially sees the memories of all the people after the old mother Vera. She even sees memories from her mother, and she sees memories from herself that very night at the hospital, and she sees that it was actually Sel's mother that mesmered her to forget what happened, and she realizes that Sel's mother and her mother were actually very good friends. Sel's mother was completely aware of her human self. She had not gone into like demon form at any point, and she was actually crying about Bree's mother's passing. So once she is back in her normal self, Vera is like, okay, these are our memories, but there's something else that you can accept if you want to, an oath that I did not have to bear. And Bree says, okay, I'm ready. And someone else comes out of Bree, and it's not Vera, it's not her grandmother, and it's not anyone else in her bloodline. It is none other than the spirit of Arthur. I could not have anticipated this at any point in this book. Nothing pointed me to this. Absolutely nothing. So we find out that Reynolds, the slave owner, was actually a scion of Arthur. And so therefore, the reason why they were trying to go after Vera so much is because she was unknowingly carrying the descendants of Arthur and continuing that bloodline. I literally could not have guessed. So Bree, now possessed by both Vera and Arthur, goes to the sword and the stone, pulls it out, no hesitation. Everyone is shocked, jaws on the floor. No one is expecting this. I wasn't expecting this for sure. While she's possessed by both Arthur and Vera, she's using her rootcraft, her ether. She's using everything. She's using the sword. Arthur is helping her fight because now since she's awakened, she's able to call upon his traits. He was a very good fighter. So she ends up defeating everyone. She defeats Roz, and they find out because Nick was technically awakened. So they're like, if he wasn't awakened by Arthur, who was he awakened by? It was actually Lancelot, number 2 in line. He's not actually the scion of Arthur. He's a scion of Lancelot. And you might be asking, why? I'll get to that. So they all fight courageously. Arthur helps Bree defeat everyone. They're assumingly like all good, everything's good, but Arthur now in Bree's body is like turning to all the other scions, and they're like, has it been so long since you've seen your king that you don't know how to kneel? And Bree's like, no, wait, please guys, I don't want you to do that, I don't want you to do that. And everyone is like, the line is lost. So they all get down, they all bow to her, including Nick, who is very upset. Like he looks like he's been betrayed, and he bows to her, and she's like, I don't want this, and then she like passes out. So in the next chapter, Bree wakes up, she's in the infirmary, she's talking with everyone, and they essentially figure out that the reason that Nick is not the scion of Arthur is because, so back in that original memory, the wife of Reynolds, who was a slave owner, was actually having an affair with the scion of Lancelot. She got pregnant by him and passed it off as his son. So they thought that the Davises were carrying the line of Arthur, but they actually weren't. It's so eloquently crafted because Bree, her bloodline, is carrying the Arthur scion line, right? And now, not only is every descendant of Arthur gonna be a root crafter, there's gonna be a black woman every single time. That's divine justice right there. Divine justice. Tor doesn't accept Bree as her king. And I also love they call her king. They don't call her queen, they call her king because she's King Arthur. Tor is not accepting of Bree. She ends up calling the regents, and they're like, this is a mistake. It's supposed to be Nick. You're not supposed to be the scion of Arthur. Like, we need to get this figured out. So they're all fighting. Alice is actually rooting for her. She's like, who are you talking to, Miss number 3 in line? My bestie right here is the king. You should bow down. Tor tries to attack Alice. Sarah has to hold her back. It's high tensions. Everyone's going crazy. And then they figure out that Nicholas is not in the lodge. Nicholas has been kidnapped. Oh my god. Bree ends up leaving for a little bit to get some fresh air. She's very overwhelmed. She has so many things that are going on with her right now. She's now the scion of Arthur. She's a root crafter. She's a medium. She's so much. She talks to Selwyn a little bit, and they have like a heart to heart, and he's like being super nice to her. He also calls her something that is Welsh, but in my brain, what does he call her? Oh, he calls her like Cariad, which like in my brain, I don't know the proximity to Welsh to Spanish. Probably none. My brain is like, it sounds like cariño. It sounds something like cute, like a cute little pet name. I don't know. Bree ends up telling Sel about her memory walk with her ancestor and how she saw his mother on the night that her mother died. And she was like, your mother looked fine. She did not look like that she was a demon in any way. Up until now, they were under the impression that if they were not oath-bound to the order, that they would succumb to their demon side. She's like, maybe the regents are lying and maybe that's not true. And he's like, you know, a lot of things are not true when it comes to you. So I believe that. I believe you. I'm in love with you. He doesn't say that last part. The end of the book is it's Sel and Bree, and they kind of go off into the forest, and their next mission is they have to find Nick. They have to save him. They don't know what's happening. They have to figure out more about what Bree is and what she can do. So Bree and Sel end up going into the forest, and she takes a leap into her future, and the book ends. And that's it. One thing I did want to bring up, this one quote that I did want to say because it was so beautiful, because she has a lot of conflicting feelings now that she knows her origins, especially with the history with Vera And the order, she says, I cry for all of my people, for the thread of death and violence forcibly woven into our blood and the resistance we had to grow to survive. I am the product of violence and I am the scion of Arthur. Unspeakable evil gave me Arthur. Vera's resistance gave me power, but I earned my will. Because after Bree essentially held back both Arthur and her Rootcraft side, she essentially has to come to terms with all of that. So I didn't really articulate a lot of like my analysis thoughts on Legendborn as well as I wanted to. And after I finished recording, I was really thinking about it. And I kind of went back and tried my best to articulate what I was thinking. So I have some stuff written down here. I want to specifically analyze the differences between the Legendborn Society and Rootcraft. The Legendborn Society and Rootcraft are the manifestations of the differences between the communities respectively. The order works on principles of exclusion, while Rootcraft focuses on preserving the practice. Rootcraft is much more intimate than Bloodcraft. It's actively passed down from mothers to their daughters and unique to each family, but is still binded together under the umbrella of Rootcraft. The families in the order are born into it, raised in its practices, and forced to continue its cycle whether they want to or not. They believe they have a greater purpose that is beyond them, to protect once-borns from the Shadowborn, even though we know that they are not the only ones that can do so. On top of that, there is a greater implication that the Legendborn are born and raised to fight in wars of their own creations. We see this with Martin Davis, and his whole purpose in starting Camlan is because he wants his son to be able to experience life as an awakened scion of Arthur. He says that he thinks the order is losing its purpose, but you would imagine in a world where you have to fight against demons that that's not something that would necessarily be too bad. I hate to tie these two things together, but if you think about Hawks from My Hero Academia, he says that his dream is that every hero can retire, and ironically, a similar issue of corruption is also brought up in that story. You would imagine that in this society where they're constantly having to fight to the point of near-death experiences, that not having as many Shadowborn would be something good. But what separates the Legendborn from the Rootcrafter is that the Legendborn, the Order, they all thrive in these instances of chaos and war. If there are no Shadowborn, then how can the Order separate itself from society? How can they preserve their lineage? How can they stay at the top of that society? Because as we know, the Order is not just all the Legendborn. The Order is ingrained into our normal once-born world. They're in positions of power. They're in the administration of the college. They're in the police. So if the Order were not to exist and there was no Shadowborns to fight, then all that power just goes away. Anything that separated them initially just goes away. The implication that the Order would die out if lines aren't continued is completely opposite to Rootcraft. Because even if, for example, Bree never has children, Rootcraft will live on through others in the community, because Rootcraft isn't unique to only her family, it's shared amongst the greater Black community. It's a preserving kind of magic, one that doesn't fade and only grows. And as generations continue on, the roots grow deeper into the earth. Each Rootcrafter is different, and their abilities even differ amongst bloodlines, but they are united by the general practice and its preservation through generations. There's no desire to have power or assert yourself over other people. Other than a general disdain for the Legendborn, they don't interact with them in any way. Because another core difference between the Legendborn and Rootcrafters is that Rootcraft was created to protect and connect with their ancestors. This desire for connection and longing for something greater and the past and the people that connect you amongst your lineages is something that differs between the Rootcrafters and the Legendborn. They have an entire map of their entire family lines going to the 6th century, whereas Bree already discusses that's not a luxury that she and a lot of other Black people in America have. The only way that they can get connected with their ancestors is through root. It's something that is active, conscious, and constantly needs to be nurtured. There's also an allusion to the greater theme of birthright, where the Legendborn believe they are owed their lineage and all the privileges that come with it, while Rootcrafters must seek it out, maintain these connections through offerings, constant connection with their ancestors and with their immediate families. The scion lines must be painstakingly tracked, monitored, and curated over generations, while for Bree and her friends, their ancestry runs deep into the earth, like roots that can't be pulled up. There are also heavy themes of loss. For the Legendborn, Abatement is not a very big price to pay for their abilities, depending on which half of the Scion line you belong to. Those at the very top rarely have to pay this price. Instead, it's carried by those at the bottom. But even so, even the perceived lower class of Scion lines still have a lineage that will be passed down, something about them that will continue to live on. Their perception of loss is not the same as Breeze or even other root crafters. It's not a legacy that lives on, but rather the pain of that loss. Emotions such as anger, frustration, all these negative emotions are symbolized by the red mage flame that Bree can produce. But it is the acceptance of that pain and the acknowledgement of loss that grants power for her. It's like the Unsung Founders Memorial. When Patricia sees it, she sees that even now they are still working. But as a visual representation of grief and generational trauma, it can be seen as the persistent and everlasting resilience. But the passing down of the pain and loss, Bree's ancestors passed down the power to overcome it. The Scion lines are continued largely because of a larger obligation, but Bree's line is continued by choice. Each woman knows that should she choose to pass down the power, that she will not survive and she will subject her daughter to the same grief and loss she experienced. But every woman since Vera chose to do so. For protection? Of course. But because they knew that death connects them, and even in losing their mothers, they will forever be connected to every mother that came before them. And the last thing to finish off my thought was, and even if the last daughter dies, they will live on in their roots. There's so many other themes that are covered in this book. It's just so hard to articulate each and every single one of them, but those were just a few that really stuck with me. And as you can tell, I am now obsessed with this series. I have found my new obsession. There's been a handful of times where I've read a book and I was like, I'm actually going to become obsessed with this. Like, there's books I've read where I was like, this is a really good book, or this is a really great book. But the last time that I became obsessed with something was Percy Jackson. And as you can tell, it takes up my this whole shelf is all Percy Jackson books. And I have a Percy Jackson tattoo. So I get another sword tattoo. Anyway, yeah, so that was Legendborn. We have one more book in the series, and the next one is Bloodmarked. That's number 2. I don't have that book in my collection. I might have to break my little deal. So Legendborn, I believe, is also a banned book, and I wonder why. It also won an award, the Coretta Scott King Award. This book is very good. Again, it's very long, but it is worth every read, every single page, every word is masterfully crafted. It really examines grief in a way that turns it into power. I'm gonna rate this, I think the first video I said a 5 out of 5, and then I said 10 out of 10. So keeping with that, I'm gonna rate it a 20 out of 20. It's a really amazing book. It's so powerful. I was literally crying. This book is set to be, no, it's supposed to be a 4-book series, and then there's a TV show coming. I don't know when. I'm gonna be in my 30s loving that series. Anyway, it really leaves me speechless. I love this book. It was so beautifully crafted. The audiobook is 18 hours, and I loved all 18 hours of it. We're going to February now. I have read 4 books on my TBR list, and I have so many more to go. I'm trying to read a book a week. It's a little hard, but seeing as February is Black History Month, I'm going to try and read books written Black authors, which is not to say that we should only focus on Black authors in February. Absolutely not, because these books can be enjoyed outside of February. These books exist outside of February, and we should highlight them and praise them outside of this month. And this is another focus of this series, is to really focus on the diversity of this bookshelf, because there's so many books that you can read and so many voices you can hear from, and it's important that we go out of our way to find these voices and hear the stories, because this was so beautiful, so powerful, and truly an experience I don't think I could have gotten from just anyone. So the next book that I will be reading, that I gracefully had in my collection, and I think is a more recent publication, is The Black Queen, which is a murder mystery. And I don't read too many mysteries, but every single one that I've read so far is good, and I know this one is going to be good. So that's next on the list. You should follow Tracy Dion on social media. Updates about the 3rd book coming out, which is Oathbound. I don't know when. I haven't found the cover art. I haven't found anything about this book, but apparently there's an excerpt that's going to be put out with a new release of a re-release rather of Bloodmark. Oh god, so many words. Anyway, yep, so that's it for this one. I don't even want to know how much editing I'm gonna have to do for this, because the other ones I've been kind of getting by with like a week's worth. This is really gonna take some time. I should have a sign off. It's been 3 videos and I don't have a way of saying bye to everyone. Read Legendborn. It's really good. live to slay another day. That's it.